anytime something wasn't going right in my life, or I felt like there was a gap, it was all on me to close that gap. You're only limited to the tools that you have in your vicinity. It's now to drop the ego and say, okay, cool, how can I best procure that knowledge so that I can level up?
Hi, it's Ekezie. Welcome to Limitless. In this series, we spotlight the most incredible young people from across the world who are pushing boundaries and inspiring excellence. You're definitely in the right place if you're a young person who is looking to defy the boxes that have been placed on you by yourself and by other people. Here, we believe that your potential is truly limitless. Please like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed it to see more. Now, let's get into the video. George, it's been a long time coming, and I'm glad we're able to get this in. Thank you, sir. I know you're very busy, and I'm glad you're able to make some time for us today.
Pleasure, man.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. For people who don't know you, you've worked in STEM for a very long time, despite being really young. I think most people will be surprised to know how old you are. Given everything you've accomplished.
Yeah.
And you've been incredibly passionate about empowering young people with STEM skills to become like you and even greater if possible.
The plan.
That's the plan, right? Where do these intentions stem from? Why is this something that's important to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, probably have to go back to being a kid.
Yes, let's go.
I always put the hashtag
the kid from Peckham.
It reminds me of where I'm coming from. Not my parents are from Nigeria, Edo State, but in terms of where I grew up in my childhood, and that's where I think the interest from STEM really began. And it was when I got my first bike. Well, that's when people think it came, but it was actually when I saw someone that was a bit older in and around the area fixing bikes for the older, the older community. And I thought there was no one actually doing it for the young people, right? So we would see these bike shops that were relatively expensive. Our bikes would be left to rust in our gardens and no one really doing anything. We're just not repurposing the bikes. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So before sustainability
became
cool, we were like, what can I actually do? So I would go to my mum's kind of bag, ransack it, try and find some money, spare change to essentially buy some inner tubes and do what that older person was doing. So he was probably, I've never said it before, but probably my first inspiration of seeing these bikes which I thought were cool. He was doing something that I thought was cool, and let me try and do it for my community of people that were a bit younger. So that's where it all started. And then from that interest with two wheels, I used to race around Peckham car park, and then two wheels went to four wheels. I started go-karting.
Oh wow.
Go-karting in a place called Burgess Park, and that karting track eventually closed down because of insufficient funds. They didn't have enough that to run the operation. So I kind of said, if I can't be inside of the car and race, I'll be outside of the car and want to build it. This is not to say I was the fastest person. I'm not acting like I was a Schumacher or Hamilton or anything like that, but it was something that I enjoyed, right? So, and then at that point, around 14, I had to choose my GCSE options, and it was like motor mechanics, engineering GCSEs. I didn't know what engineering was. I didn't know what an engineer was. Just people that knew how to fix things.
Yeah.
Right? Like back in Nigeria, there's people that they are so resourceful.
Yeah.
They know how to fix things and make things work, but they haven't attached a label to it of what that person is. Maybe they just see it as, mechanic, but
and they didn't go to school for it too.
Go to school for it. You know what I mean? They just are able to take their initiative, right? So my brother was telling me at the time, consider engineering, and some of his friends also saying, consider engineering, that will open up more doors. So I decided to choose that at 14. So I was doing that, and then I eventually was so devoted. I introduced Saturday schools. I was coming into school on Saturday to finish off my product.
Wow.
Other people were following suit after that, and that was just a great opportunity for me to be fully devoted to something for the first time.
What product were you working on?
So it was actually a sustainable product yet again.
Wow.
So it was a product that minimized the volume of bins. So once you put all your waste in there, compacted it as much as possible to essentially use more of the bin throughout the day. So that was the product that I was building from, let's say, 14 to 16. And then eventually that became the school's best project. It was the exemplar that they were using across the school, across the examination board to show this is a portfolio. And I was like, a little kid like me, from fixing bikes to building a product. And then the journey just continued on from there. But I think that's what sparked the interest in STEM. First of all, I didn't know it was STEM. I just thought I was fixing things, but I wanted to create. I knew I wanted to do that as opposed to just fixing things. I thought, let me create. And that's what is the difference between a mechanic and
the engineer.
Is that you're thinking about creating something that means that you no longer have to fix it in the same way, and maybe you can continue using it. It can be more durable. So I wanted to make products that improve people's quality of life, standard of living. And it was probably at that point that motivation really came to life.
As you went through this journey, were there examples of people you always had in mind at every step of the way to aspire towards?
If I'm honest, the only person that I knew at that point in my local area was that...
the bike shop guy.
Literally. He was doing it in the front of his garden, thankfully, so I could see it, and but that was the only person. And then when I started studying for my engineering GCSE, my teacher, Mr. Beamer, Mr. David Beamer, absolute legend. He was from South Africa, and he would just be using all of these different machines and tools in ways that I had never seen before.
Wow.
And that was my opportunity to get exposed to, this is how you can build. Like, you're only limited to the tools that you have in your vicinity. And I realized that there's so many tools out there, so let me get as many of them as possible and add as many tools to my toolbox, so I wouldn't be limited in any way. So that was when the passion kind of came, just to be insatiable and try to learn as many skills as possible. But I would say it's only that guy from Peckham in the garden and my teacher. And then he wasn't an engineer, he was a D&T teacher, design and technology. I don't know if he classes himself as an engineer or not, but he was teaching the course, and that's where the inspiration came for me. And then it was like, okay, so either I go and I want to help people. Ultimately, that was the core thing. So when I was taking money from my mum's purse, and so it was literally so that I can help people, so they don't have to, like, they can afford the service, that they otherwise couldn't. Initially I did it for free, and then eventually I had to charge.
It has to be sustainable.
Exactly.
It has to be.
But it was always affordable for them, so that they could actually be able to get back on the road and play out with me. That was essentially the ambition at the time.
I think the luckiest men are those who have good teachers. And, similarly, I had an incredible story with one of my secondary school teachers who taught me government. And
was there similar?
Exactly similar. And I think the person you see today is a direct product of just being under his tutelage for 3 years. So, you're 14, decide to do engineering in your GCSEs under the tutelage of Mr. David Beamer. And a few years later, you're interning at Rolls-Royce, working on jet engines. What's that story?
That is a story. So essentially, as soon as I had stopped go-karting and I had moved on to engineering, I kind of now knew, okay, cool, I could build something. So I had left the go-karts, and I knew I wanted to go back there at some point. Motorsport was definitely a massive interest. So I had this gap though between 16 and 18 where I had to choose subjects that would hopefully get me there. Maths and all the sciences, I didn't love.
No?
I wasn't.
Oh, wow.
Maths, because there was like an easy, so like there was a way, there was a method. There were methods that, and I'm a very logical thinker, so that was okay. I enjoyed that, but for the rest of the sciences, it was like a means to an end.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was a means to an end. So I was like, you can hate school, but you need to love options. And that was my big thing. So I was like, if this allows me to have as many options as possible, great. And it's not because my mom wanted me to be a doctor.
No, okay. You're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. I was pretty lucky. It was just, let me give myself as much options, because I actually just wanted to help people. And there's so many ways to do that, right? And I was undecided between engineering and medicine at the time. And then I realized, okay.
In hindsight, are you grateful you went with?
So grateful. I would have been a dead doctor.
Oh my God. Yeah, we probably wouldn't know each other.
I wouldn't have been the one at all. So I kind of just said, okay, engineering or medicine, I'm still not sure, but in this 2-year period, let me get as many experiences as possible and learn. So 16, I'm pursuing maths and all the sciences. I joined this organization called the Amos Bursary. And that was an opportunity for me to join an organization that normalized success. So now I saw people doing everything. People wanted to become pilots, check.
Wow.
Engineers, check. Medics, check. Bankers,
And around what period was
industry.
this? Was this like high school, pre-university?
Yeah, so this is pre-university,
Okay.
just before university, where I'm a bit undecided. But engineering's in my heart, but I'm still a bit undecided because I'm seeing all these options arising now. And then at that point, I'm doing the A-levels. I do an EPQ, which is an extended project qualification, build another product again.
Yeah, wow.
I'm bored of doing these subjects. Let me at least build something.
You wouldn't have been building product in like, medical theaters, assuming you went there, like,
Exactly,
yeah.
Right? So I was like, okay, cool. This is a good thing for me to do. So I got consumed doing that. And then that kept me going as I was essentially trying to explore what I wanted to do. And then from that point on, it was like, okay, great. I was complacent in my first year of college, if I'm honest. So I didn't get the grades that I really wanted. So the predicted grades wasn't the greatest, but they were enough for me to apply to the institutions that I wanted to go into. UCL, Imperial, Cambridge were the top of the list because I wanted to be with the best people in engineering, people that were creating solutions or potentially run a business as well. So that was kind of where my mind was at the time. And then eventually, fast forward, got all the A's I needed to kind of, go into engineering at UCL. So I studied mechanical engineering with programming. And then at that point, I could now start doing something called Formula Student. Have you heard of Formula Student before?
No.
So it's a student-led competition that hundreds of universities across Europe can get involved in to design and build build and test a single-seater race car and eventually race in Silverstone.
That's crazy.
So sick.
Wow.
So I realized in first year of university that I can get. So now this dream that I had at 14, so now it's coming back to life again. So I'm volunteering in first year and second year, doing everything I can. Again, in the summer, I'm volunteering and supporting them build products. So when you put your foot on the brake and the accelerator at the same time, usually that's because you're in a crash. If you do it for a long period of time, the car shuts down. So I made all of those devices. It's called a brake plausibility device. And then I was like, okay, cool. My third year, I'm going to apply for this to be my project that I do. This is the project that I've come here to do. And then I got rejected. I was like...
How did you feel in that moment?
I don't think I've ever felt more bitter in my life.
Oh my God.
Because I spoke about Mr. Beamer
and
inspiring me to go into engineering. And now there was another professor that I looked up to so much. And now I'm being rejected from essentially doing his project.
Oh no.
Well, what do you do at that point, right? So I now had to find another inspiration, another person that I could look up to that said, you can do it too. Someone that believed in me. So there was another supervisor called Mark Miodovnik, and he had been all about building, all about creating. He had created an institution called Institution of Making at UCL. He had been the #1 guy when it comes to materials. So I was like, I'm going, because he allowed people to come and do their self-proposed projects. I said, I'm going to go to him. And again, I'm going to work on a sustainable project yet again. And he's going to be my supervisor. He eventually said yes. And then I applied to Rolls-Royce for my first year of university. Rejected me. I failed a numerical test.
Oh no.
Which I got A in maths.
Oh my God. Yeah.
They do these processes to filter out.
Yeah, and I hate standardized tests, and that's exactly what that is. So you need to learn to play the game.
Literally, so I learned to play the game. Yeah. So I realized they do negative marking. I was like, okay. So I'm gonna. You have to find a way to get in the system. So I said, okay, cool. Next time around, any questions I don't know,
leave it blank.
Yeah. I'm just going to go for it. And then I still didn't get an interview. And then I eventually said, okay, I'm going to ring up the recruiter. She helped me to begin with, for my first application, and told me about this process being negative marking, and asked where my application is, because I still hadn't heard about an assessment center, and it was coming to the end of the point that they were doing assessment centers. So, and then the next day, I got an invitation to...
No way. After you called her up?
Yeah, literally. And then didn't know about jet engines before this. Before my assessment center, I did not know what a jet engine was. No clue. So I'm on YouTube, just figuring out, okay, cool. What is a jet engine? How does it work? How does it operate? So then eventually I go into my interviews in assessment center. I've done all my research. I've done everything I need to do. And enjoy the experience, have a great time. Then I get invited, to do an internship. So this is rejection and then now being accepted.
Wow.
And then I use that project as part of my third year project. And that is an opportunity for me now to redesign a component that hadn't been touched in almost 40 years. It wasn't a sexy component. It wasn't anything that people thought was interesting. But I managed to work under the tutelage of somebody else again, who taught me everything I needed to know about computational fluid dynamics, CFD. And I worked with him to redesign these components in the engine that had massive scale.
Wow. So for context, for those who don't know, Rolls-Royce makes engines for planes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Planes, also submarines. So they say air, land, and sea.
And sea. Oh, nice.
So all verticals, but they don't make cars. So they sold that company, I believe, to BMW.
I know that.
Quite some time
I actually
ago.
met the former CEO of Rolls-Royce 2 weeks ago in Switzerland.
Was that Warren East? Warren East is the current one.
I know the former one. I don't remember his name now, but
So I had an opportunity to essentially go there, redesign one of their components, improve the aerodynamic efficiency on it by 40%, which led to a 1.5% improvement in what they call specific fuel consumption. It was around 0.1 all in all. And then that amounted to quite a large saving. Can you guess how much? Do you know?
I think I saw the number 50 million.
50 million.
Man.
Right. So it was pretty large. And at that point, there was another moment where it's like, George, you still got this.
You got this.
You can really make an impact. So, and then that was a story. It was like using that as my third year project. So that was my best dissertation in the year, best project in the year. And that again was another exemplar. So that was like 16-year-old George and 20-year-old George experiencing the same thing. So I feel like I'm on a roll at this point, but rejections are very much
baked into the journey. One thing that's very interesting, at these different levels of complexity, you manage to find a way. How did you level up your skill set to, going from making repairing bikes, 7-8 years later, you're working on jet engines. How do young people embody this level of incredible self-development? For you, it's technical, it's life or death, when you're working on jet engines at that point.
100% safety is the critical thing in the jet engine context and the airplane context. There's so much regulation that means until you've gone over these loops and hoops, you cannot, implement your component. Now that component that I built is in many different engines around the world that are flying today. So I think in terms of upskilling yourself, for me, education has been the biggest thing that I've betted on in terms of getting the knowledge to begin with, and that knowledge and then allowed me to know what skills I was missing. So it might be something like thermal fluids, thermodynamics, which is all about energy. Okay, so what skills don't you know when it comes to this topic? So as you're trying to acquire this knowledge, what skills are essential? Because every piece of knowledge probably has some skill that you need to apply.
But how do you know what you don't know? Because if you ask me,
unknowns. So I think for me, again, that was the education piece. So it's procuring as much information as you can. For me, fortunately enough, that was through my engineering GCSE or through my course with mechanical engineering and programming, and meeting the different professors during the lectures and everything. But if I'm honest, the best way to learn is actually on the job. It was when I was doing projects that I was learning, okay, cool, how do I make this thing round, this square at the moment? And then you realize, okay, you need to develop the skill to use a sander so you can turn this rectangular shape to a circular shape, or at least add some edges. So, and then you now learn how to use that, and someone teaches you how to use it, but it's usually until you reach a blocker, and then you start to develop a skill. But if you've not applied yourself to reach that blocker.
So it's like people need to literally get out of their beds and apply themselves in the smallest way. And
exactly that.
Exactly
that. It's by getting skin in the game. Essentially, that I believe your skills start to grow because you start to realize the areas that you're deficient in, and that's absolutely fine. It's now to drop the ego and say, okay, cool, how can I best procure that knowledge so that I can level up and get to that next place? And that's usually people. I wasn't the smartest person on my course. I knew the smartest people on my course. And that was an opportunity for me to learn the knowledge and the skills in order to kind of level up.
Yeah. One thing that I'm sure you and I will agree on is some of the smartest people in, well, not the smartest, but the most successful people in the world are incredibly ambitious. And seems like through your journey, you had to level up your ambition. And, you know, it sounds like the Amos bursary, for example, was very helpful. What other pockets of opportunity to increase your ambition did you take advantage of?
I would say the first thing that caught me in terms of ambition and the reason why I became ambitious, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the first ones was when I heard about a scholarship. I never knew what a scholarship is. I know you've had scholarships, you know what I mean? But I never knew what a scholarship was up until 14 or so. But as soon as I knew what it was, that somebody in the UK context would give me £36,000 to go to university, fully paid.
Yeah.
And I could get more scholarships. I had 6+ scholarships by the time I was done.
Crazy.
So I was being paid.
Okay, that's way more than I was
being
ever
paid
had.
to go to university at that point, right? So I was like, this is actually a potential. So I think there was definitely that, because we grew up with, you know, next to nothing. You know, in the Peckham context, there was a lot of poverty essentially in that area. So I think for me, seeing that was the first place where it was like, okay, cool, I can access this capital from there. I don't have to do all these things that people are doing in and around my environment. If I'm devoted to the education and apply myself, then at least I can be an option that they can choose from, right? So I think that was the first place where my ambition started to get stirred up. And then I think it is the communities that I started to join, like Amos Bursary, where there's so many people whereby they've all come from diamond in the dirt. You know, they're all just being polished and they're going for everything that they want to do. And I'd never seen that in the environment that I'd grown up in. So I think exposure is a big thing. When you expose yourself to things, and thankfully we've got TikTok, we've got YouTube, we've got so many things now where you can see things, but often we end up in the place of comparison. Yeah. Of saying, okay, cool, that person's that. You never see yourself in that person. But for me, I was very keen, as soon as I joined the Amos Bursary, to take personal responsibility for everything.
What did you do to take personal responsibility?
For me, that was anytime something wasn't going right in my life, or I felt like there was a gap, it was all on me to close that gap. I wasn't going to blame the teacher. I wasn't going to blame my parents. I wasn't going to blame the economy or anything that was going on in and around me. I was focused on how can I, within my circle of influence, make a dent and make an impact.
Wow. That aspect of personal responsibility is something I think that is broadly missing amongst most young people.
That was the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. How can we increase the overall net levels of just people taking personal responsibility for their own lives and hopefully for their community?
That's a great question. I would say, so it was a 2014 conference at the Amos Bursary for me that really flipped the switch. They spoke about this fixed mindset and growth mindset.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily feel like I was in the fixed mindset camp, but the more and more they explained it, I was like,
God, I'm pretty fixed.
Okay, you know what I mean? I'm pretty fixed in a lot of areas, right? Like,
at least I'm definitely not in the growth mindset camp. Yeah, I read that book 2 years ago or so, and I was like, wow, so much to learn.
Exactly, right? And I think when I started to realize about the abundance of the opportunities, the fact that, you know, in a fixed mindset, you're like, what opportunities are out there? In the growth mindset, you're like, what opportunities can we create?
Yeah.
Us being here, you've created an opportunity that didn't exist before, you know? And I think at that point, I started to realize or be so excited by the opportunities that could be created and the things that I was seeing at that conference of people, for example, you know, developing F1 innovations. And I was like, all that person did was take responsibility and said that I've got an opportunity here. Yeah. And if I make the most of it, I might not have to do all these. I can just become an investor. Yeah. And
which is pretty nice.
It's pretty nice. Yeah. Right? So I was like, you know what? Like actually taking initiative, which is what the Motivez mindset is all about for me. Taking initiative, which is personal responsibility. It's like you take it upon yourself to make a change, to make a difference, because no one's coming to save you. You know, I'm a big believer. You know, in Christ, like that's my faith, but I still don't believe anyone's coming down to save me right now, right? It's on me to make some magic happen. And everyone around me might support me, or maybe they don't. Yeah. It's on me to make sure I get as much of that the tools in my toolbox and the people that are going to help me get to the next level. So for me, it's all about people. People have helped me get everything that I've got now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so through your university, days, if I remember correctly, you went through just a diverse range of internships. You BCG, I think, Google,
banking,
yeah, exactly.
Tech.
And post graduating, between then and now, what have you mostly been working on and busy with?
Yeah, so the biggest thing post graduation was I got an email in August of 2020 from a guy called Lewis Hamilton. You know him?
Wow.
Sir Lewis Hamilton, right? And that came off the back of when I was a delegate, and yourself a delegate of One Young World, and they put me forward to Lewis and his team to join the board of the Hamilton.
Oh, nice.
So that was where it all came from. So I got this email, which I thought was spam at the time.
Yeah, it's like you don't expect that to show up in your inbox at the height of the pandemic, like just randomly. Yeah,
exactly, right. So at that point, I just graduated, and I was, young people were going through so much. So Motivez was created to empower underserved young people to access STEM jobs and become change makers. So it was like, if they're losing all the opportunities now, this is our time to give them hope and create as many opportunities, at least show them what they can do post-COVID, and hopefully help some of them during this time. So that was my number one focus. So him coming on the scene actually kind of threw it off a bit. I was like, what do I do? But it was just a board.
Yeah.
But I was like, is it just a board? What else is going on? And I realized that he was setting up this race team called Team X44. And then when I went into that first meeting and I gave my introduction, it was one where you couldn't escape, my interest in motorsport and my passion and what I wanted
like
to
it
do.
perfectly aligns. It's almost like a story that was perfectly written, and you can literally draw a line between your childhood and now.
Exactly.
It's mind-blowing.
Exactly. But at the same time, one thing that's important to know is I had given up on the motorsport dream after that. Professor essentially rejected me from, the former student college. So I'm still with a lot of doubts, but I'm like, if I can get this introduction right and they know what I'm about.
How long did you prepare for the introduction?
I can't remember. I think I spoke to a few different people, a few friends at the time, friends yet again, to kind of give me feedback on how I can be a better storyteller. People like Isaiah, I could speak to so that I can get that introduction, spot on from that first board meeting. And then, I got an email straight after that board meeting asking, if I could help them with mechanics and engineers. And we've been doing this at Motors for years. So we said, more than happy. And then they were like, well, so why don't you put your CV in there as well? You spoke about your interest in motorsport. And I was like,
sure.
Why not? You know what I mean? But I still wanted to just help other people to get in. I wanted to show that diversity and excellence go hand in hand and help Lewis build the most diverse team that could win on track. So that was my ambition. But they eventually said, well, we looked at all the CVs. Your CVs is probably the best one there. So would you like to come to pre-season testing in Spain, see how you find it, and then apply for the role as a junior engineer? So I said,
sure.
These opportunities don't come much, so let me go and experience it for myself. And then, I became a performance engineer in my second year, where we won the championship. So that's the world championship with an Extreme E, and that's from being rejected from the Formula student team. That's the pathway to get to Formula One and the upper echelons of motorsport, to winning the championship. That was a crazy experience. And then my third year, I became the race engineer, so responsible for all the engineering duties and operating the car, speaking to the driver, making sure that they execute the strategy on track and win races.
That was such a fun job, very exhilarating.
Yeah.
One of my most fun things on Instagram is to just see your pictures from your trips and when you're on the course, like Saudi Arabia and all of those fun places.
All around the world, to places that were most affected by climate change, essentially, and raise awareness of the issues in those areas. Like places like Greenland, for example. Imagine Greenland, you're seeing the glaciers, and then you're seeing it's electric cars. So it's almost like the solution imposed on the problem. And I think that imagery, for what it does for the fans, everyone watching at home, because there's no spectators there, in order to reduce the carbon footprint, it's still got a long way to go, but I think it just showed the possibilities, essentially, and that those are endless.
Wow. George, one of the most incredible things about your story is you're, on the one hand, an incredibly technically competent person, and on the other hand, you're someone who from a very young age has just wanted to open doors for other people, not necessarily from a position of being ahead of others, but it's people who are alongside you horizontally, and everyone needs to get in the door. Most people feel like they need to become like very wealthy and super old, and then they like give back when they're billionaires. Why is it important that it's something you start as a kid in your case, and build that as you go along?
That's a great question. For me, I'm thankful enough that I've had my brother Kenny, 4 years older than me, that was always about the community and helping people. He never broadcast it, really, if I'm honest. So I was fortunate enough that I was his brother to see he was always helping people, always giving money to different organizations that you might see now that are going and smashing it. He was one of their first donors.
Wow, what a guy.
When things happen. So I think a chance to see that allowed me to know that the importance of serving your way to the top. Like, you don't have to wait, to do the giving pledge. When you're a millionaire, you don't have to wait. I do believe that you should do that too. But it's really like, I think from that conference in 2014, everything comes back down to that. It's like, I realized at that point, I had to do my obituary. I don't know if you've ever written before your obituary or gone through that.
I've not, but I've not.
It can be morbid for a lot of people, but for me at that point, I had to think about, okay, cool. Who was the richest person that died yesterday? Do you know?
Nope. I don't care.
Nobody knows, and nobody cares. You know what I mean? So I realized, okay, it's not acquiring the most wealth that is really important. It's about the people that impacted you. That teacher that you said in your government class for 3 years that really had an impact. So I was like, this is about the feeling that I leave on people. So when my kids at the time, when my partner, when my brother, when my mum have to go up on that stage, hopefully it's not my mum and, I can outlive her. But, at whatever stage, if I was to pass away, I can know that I've made a difference now. And I didn't just come here to consume. I came here to produce and add and contribute to the world and serve. So I think for me, it was that. And I was like, I can do that now. So that's why we created Motivez in 2015. And this will be our 9th year anniversary, to make sure that we're serving our way to the top and we're not waiting until the end. So for me, it's all about starting now. Start with where you are, your circle of influence. I started out tutoring. That's how it all began for me. Or in the community, fixing bikes. It doesn't have to be this huge
grandiose thing.
I didn't visualize something grandiose. I just kept putting skin in the game, learning new skills. And you realize my best and highest use in 2014 is not my best and highest use in 2024. Now I'm so much more capable. I can do so much. So now it's like, let's do those things.
Man, I can't wait to see the next 20 years. I just can't wait.
I'm excited.
Yeah. What role does faith play in your journey and your life?
Faith plays a massive part. That was the big part of my transition. So maybe we'll speak about some of the challenges that I've had. But I think as part of those challenges, you're often lost, right? My dad wasn't growing up with me in the UK context, so you're always looking for, father figure and different people in the community, and often those are positive and often they're not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think for me, the church gave me a community of people that, encouraged me, for example, with the choices that I should be making in terms of my course in college, in GCSEs. I remember just before going for my GCSEs, I was like, God, if there's always it's like, God, if you do this, if you get
I
me
would
through this,
worship you forever.
I was like, I'm so lost. I don't know what to do, but I need, a covering over me. And I know this world is just too beautiful, too magnificent to not have a creator. So at that point, I was like, this is the what I know best and what I know I've learned about so many different faiths, but this was the faith that really stood out to me the most. So I was like, there's so much wisdom. It's a well of wisdom in there. So I was like, let me tap into as much of it as possible. And that, the biggest thing that it did for me in faith is it changed my value system. It kind of allowed me to, all this service and everything that I've spoken about, that's where it came. Because I realized that somebody that could be so powerful in the case of Jesus, was washing someone's feet.
Yeah.
And I was like, who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I? There's nothing that I can't do. And that was, arguably the GOAT of all time. So I was like, if he did that, then I really want to model that example, and I'll never get there. But it's one to look to and see how I can model it in the best way.
Wow. Are there significant sacrifices you've had to make? Whether it's being a person of faith or just being someone who's chosen this path as a professional, giving back. Giving back is a weird word to use, and I don't like to use that word.
I say keeping the ladder down.
Yeah, exactly.
The ladder should never be taken.
Yeah, because I mean, it was held down for you. Keep it the way you met it. Yeah. What sacrifices have you had to make as part of that?
Wow. Yeah, too many. I've one of the biggest ones. So most of my friends were excluded from secondary school in year 8, 9, 10. So most of them didn't make it to year 11. They didn't make it to their GCSEs. So I knew the norm wasn't to these 11 GCSEs and smash it. That just wasn't the norm. So at that point, in terms of my circle and the people around me, I had to naturally distance myself from people. Not burn bridges. I don't necessarily believe in burning bridges unless people are toxic and you have no choice. But for me, it was, okay, I need to now get into a new environment that is conducive for my goals. You can't be attached to dead things and expect new things to just come to life. It's just not going to happen. And I realized that they didn't have the level of exposure that I was now getting. So like an elastic band, the tension is growing and growing. So let me just step out of this environment, keep everyone on board, document the journey, let people see. I'm not above them, I'm just going besides them. And if they're interested and inspired,
come along the journey.
You know what I mean? So that, I think, was the big thing for me in terms of sacrificing some friendships. I think that was a big thing. Another thing, I think, from like a faith perspective, there's so many small tweaks I had to make in terms of, okay, cool, you have a partner at the time, there's things that we could do before that now
you can,
you know what I mean? So it was like all of those things that I've now committed myself to, but the purity and everything that I got from that was just too much to not sacrifice. In hindsight, you don't know that.
Yeah, in real time, it's painful.
In real time, it's painful. You know what I mean? But I think after that, it was like, that's the best decision that I'd ever made, because self-control got so much greater. So there's so many sacrifices, but I think it was people and the personal sacrifices of just trying to develop that self-control so that I could actually take that personal responsibility I was speaking about before and do that at the best place.
You just mentioned having a partner, and I kind of want to go there. How important do you think it is for young, bright people, especially men, to have partners?
I think it's so important. I don't want to say it in a way, because a lot of people will go and then say, after this, I'm going to go and have let me kind of just preface it with that. It's not necessarily the case. I think for me, I was fortunate enough to have so many people older than me that I could mature fairly quickly, which was very, very useful. So I think that helped me in terms of my empathy. My empathy was always high, but I didn't necessarily have that emotional availability. So I could understand the emotions and so forth, but maybe I didn't have the self-control to not say something, not the patience. I think these things eventually came over time. But I think as I developed myself, I became a better partner over time. And then my kind of partners over the years, I think the great thing, I've had great experiences all in all, but I would say they kind of sometimes took me out to different environments to actually see the world and to see that there's so much. Because being in Peckham, it's like this, and the world is, so much larger. So I think it exposed me to the opportunities out there. It exposed me to the fact that my childhood and the way that my family setup isn't the norm. The only way to kind of grow up, and there's so many different ways. I think it gave me a level of encouragement at times when I haven't wanted to do things. I think I always had that encouragement, from having a partner. And just that belief and focus. So a lot of people would say they don't have focus, but
I think
it depends how you choose your partner.
Because the focus is, one thing I say is we don't understand how, when we're single, how much of our social interactions is in a bid to find a mate. Like
literally that. So it's like the focus came literally because, I've had 10-year relationships, for example, and that opportunity meant that I wasn't looking at
just locked in.
I was just locked in. You know, so
you know what's funny? I think people interpret this as, you know, getting a partner is a productivity hack.
To be fair, however they want to say it, that was not my intention. You know, it just so happened to be a massive benefit, a spillover benefit. You know, but I ended up being so focused, right, and it allowed me to just make the most out of what was in front of me, as opposed to looking left and looking right, and being distracted and taken off course. So. A breakup does, you know, the opposite. Though.
It does the opposite.
I would say that. So, but again, I use that as fuel anyway.
Yes,
so,
sir.
You know, there's no way we can lose.
I mean, for sure. Finally, what do you want to be remembered for?
This is what I had to think about when I was doing
the obituary. I can imagine.
I mean? So, the biggest thing for me is I want to see more people produce. You know, so I'm in STEM, so I think. We're in a world now where there's so much consumption. You wake up, maybe you're immediately on social media. You're looking at what other people are doing. Someone's created this platform that has made you so addicted. We need to detox, take some time away from it, and actually, you know, from time to time, because it's a powerful tool and it allows us to do so much. This will probably be on social media, right? But it's more like take time away from that and think, how can I be a producer? How can I create? Because it's through our creations that we actually are able to make the biggest impact. And for me, I want to be known for creating the greatest amount of change makers in STEM.
Yes, sir.
That the UK has ever seen, hopefully that the world has seen. And that's the movement, you know, and that's the marathon that I'm on, creating as many of those change makers in STEM, especially those from underserved backgrounds that wouldn't see themselves in this space because they have the ideas that haven't been thought of before. When you think of so many innovations, the light bulb, you think of Thomas Edison, but realistically, there's people, you know, behind them that were working under them, for example, that were actually, you know, developing these innovations. No one speaks about them, but those are the people that I look up to that actually are, you know, the true innovators that have made so much impact. So I think if we can make more change makers, people that actually want to produce in STEM and beyond, I think I would have lived a good life.
That's awesome, man. I think you're well on the way to meeting that goal. Thank you so much for the conversation. It's always really good to talk.
It, man.
Absolutely.
Always.